Hi, I'm Jacquelyn Watson, and I'm a business student studying finance and marketing, and I decided to study music marketing. And my project is based off of two basic assumptions. The first is that you, at some point in your life, have sought out new music to listen to. So unless you've been listening to the same album your entire life and someone gave it to you, I'm doing okay. Second is that in that process of looking for new music, you make decisions based off of things other than just how the music sounds. So that's assuming that, that's not to say that the way the music sounds doesn't matter, because that's likely what keeps you listening to it. But in first deciding what to listen to, I am assuming that there are other things that impact your decision. So from a marketing perspective, those are the spots where I could intervene, or someone could intervene and say, make sure that you are listening to the people that they want you to be based on how they present it. So the three things that I chose to study for how they influence our choices are genre, visuals, and brand. So genre gets a little bit more confusing than I was anticipating. So generally speaking, you look at it like this, that there are a couple overarching themes, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And then you zoom a little bit on this map of all the overarching genres, and it looks more like this, with all of the little white spots being different subgenres. And if you zoom in further, you get even more than what it looks like now. So that's generally speaking because artists don't want to be like other artists. They want to prove to you that they are unique and different and special, and so they make up their own names for their own subgenres. And that's why you get things like cowpunk, which I still don't know what it is, and I've only ever seen it for one album. No idea, couldn't tell you. But within genre, you can kind of present yourself in a certain way so that people see you as a specific genre, because people generally, when they choose music, go, I like this type of genre, I'm going to look for music within that. So that's what brings us to visuals. So within visuals, you need to make sure that you're kind of temporally specific, because there are certain trends that happen across time that are different from year to year. So if you looked at the last 2 years, you'd see a lot more pink. That's because millennial pink became a trend that everybody wanted to be a part of, so you're going to see more album covers with pink within them. So this very overwhelming looking image is all of the albums released in the first 6 months of 2006, roughly. It's heavily biased towards American and English-speaking albums because those were the ones that I could find. But I chose 2006 because it's far enough back that we can all kind of remember what the trends looked like, roughly. And it gives us a little bit of hindsight in being able to see it. So this looks like a lot, but if you break it down into genres, you start to see a couple trends. So if you look at metal music, you're going to see a lot of things that are white-based or all black-based, and they usually use red as an accent color. Or if you look at hip-hop, you're going to see, if it's a solo artist, it zooms in really close on their face. And if it's a group, they take a picture from a distance and usually from an angle looking up. But it almost always has the artist on the cover, whereas other things don't necessarily. And then if you look at country music, you see that they almost always have the artist on the cover. They use usually nature tones and nature imagery, roughly speaking. Now, this is more consistent for genres that are kind of self-contained. So all of these genres have their own kind of subculture around them, whereas if you look at something like rock, which bleeds into so many other genres, it's a lot harder to isolate trends because they're going to be different for each of the different subgenres within that. But country is one of the genres that people, as consumers, can easily kind of identify. They can say they hear a country song and they're easily able to say that's what this sounds like, which we're able to do regardless of whether or not we can say what exactly about the song made us think that. We might not be able to say it's the drum beat, it's the lyrics, it's the singer, but we can say that this is the genre that it sounds like. And country is one of the easiest ones to do that, which then within the genre, you can kind of differentiate yourself even further if you want to, which brings us to niche marketing. So if you, say, wanted to be a blonde pop country female soloist aimed at generally teenage girls, if you wanted to get really specific, hypothetically, there are a couple different things that you could do. So all of their album covers look pretty similar, and this is something that goes across different kind of generations of the same niche. So you have Faith Hill from the 1990s, you have Miranda Lambert from 2004, you have Carrie Underwood who debuted in 2005, and you have Taylor Swift who debuted in 2006. So as the niche gets closer together time-wise, so these last three, for example, it gets more consistent. And you're more able to see the same kind of trends in how they operate and how they present themselves to others and to make sure that they're being consumed by the right target audience. So they all four of them debuted with a love song. But the last three are better known, and their better charting single from the same debut album was the breakup song. So everybody remembers Teardrops on My Guitar because everybody was singing it when they were 12. But they don't necessarily remember Tim McGraw. But she started with Tim McGraw, Taylor Swift did, theoretically. And then Carrie Underwood, everybody remembers Before He Cheats because, again, we were 12, and I don't know who heard us, but we were really angry about it. But she introed with a love song. So theoretically, if you put all that together, you could kind of create a roadmap of, if you want to be this artist, if I really wanted to be Carrie Underwood or occupy the same spot in the market as what she occupies, then theoretically I could follow kind of the same steps. I should release an album with my face on it that I'm looking at the camera. I should use probably nature imagery, and I should make sure that people know it's me on the cover. I should also make sure that I start with a love song because that's going to chart well on country charts. But if you want to be a household name, you have to chart on more than just your genre. You have to make sure that you have a widely known appeal if you want to be one of the household names, theoretically. So then you've got to do something that everybody can, that everyone can relate to. And then make it something that's more easily consumable by the general public. And then you'll have better charting potential on like the full top 100 charts as opposed to just within your genre. So then, assuming that other people want to occupy this niche, which we assume that they do, then you can look at who's trying to do it now. So these are 4 people who within the last couple years have tried to occupy this existing niche and are trying to compete to make sure that they are the better known person in that spot within the market. So you have Casey Musgraves, you have Kelsey Ballerini, you have Daniel Bradbury, and you have Raylan. And all of them are not necessarily well-known names unless you follow country music and you're specifically looking for younger female pop country soloists. A couple of them are from 2013, a couple of them one was from, I think, 2016, and one came out last year. These are all their debut album covers. But you can see that they did kind of follow what exists in a sort of rule book. They all put their face on the cover so that everybody knew it was them. Their name is bigger than their album title because their personal brand is more important than the specific album. They all used some kind of nature imagery, generally warm tones, and Kelsey Ballerini's, to go back to temporal trends, used a lot of pink in her album cover because it came out in like 2016. So she was capitalizing on the fact that everybody wanted to put pink on something. So the theory would be that if they follow the right guidelines and come out with the right type of music at the right times, they should do well. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. So Kelsey Ballerini is more successful. Casey Musgraves just came back, but she's been trying to do it since 2013 and didn't release enough singles fast enough, theoretically. So people didn't keep her in mind when it came to who they were looking for in terms of long term. So you have her trying to compete against Kelsey Ballerini, who's been more consistent, and then Daniel Bradbury, who tried to do it and nobody's really heard from her since. So what exactly they did wrong is kind of hard to pin down. If they're not making it, was it that they didn't release a single fast enough? Were they not keeping their names in people's minds? Or did they not ever broaden their appeal to further than country music? Or was it the quality of the music, which is really hard to pin down? Because if it's just the quality, then it's really hard to say, well, this part of their music flopped with people. Was it the lyrics? Was it the sound? Was it what? But unless you have someone really study what it should be, you can't really tell. And all quality of the music aside, there's still a certain amount of marketing that goes into making sure that people consume the music in the first place. Because if nobody ever listens, then nobody will ever know what it sounds like and continue buying for the same artist. So, in conclusion, there are a couple different things that you can do, but in the end, nothing is foolproof. You can follow the steps of people who've gone before you if you want to be perceived the same way. So if you don't want to be seen as a female pop country soloist who's generally blonde and marketed at teen girls, maybe don't follow the same steps that other people do, because that's how you're going to be perceived. you can position yourself within a genre with how you do your artwork and things like that. So you can make sure that people look at it and say, when it comes up on their Spotify Discover or whatever it is, that they say, oh, I think that's a genre that I would like based on just how it looks. And then within that, you can kind of narrow down and focus on a niche. And all else equal, you can control who will seek out your music based on how you present it alone. It's hard to do, and you have to make sure that you're focusing on the right pieces of how you present yourself, but it is possible. But again, nothing is foolproof, because if your music is awful and everyone hates it, no amount of marketing can save you. I'm so sorry. And that's it. Yeah.
Did you see any difference in success for artists who chose to follow the more conventional model versus artists who wanted to differentiate themselves through the genre?
So it kind of depends. It depends on how you define success. Because if you wanted to define it as being a household name, generally speaking, if you follow the footsteps, you're going to have a better chance because people are going to recognize that and say, oh, I like when people do that. There's a reason something's popular, and it's usually because it works. But if you want to define success as having a very niche group of followers, which some musicians do, then it's very different because you're marketing specifically to that niche. So you can kind of follow a guideline, but there's a certain amount of if you differentiate it. You have to differentiate yourself somehow so that nobody just thinks you're exactly the same as everybody else, but it's really a fine line between how much can you differentiate before people look at your music and go, that doesn't even make any sense. Like if I showed you one of these album covers and then you played it and it was really heavy metal music, you'd probably be a little surprised because it's really not what you were expecting. So you have to follow a certain amount to make sure that people know what they're getting into when they listen to your music, but it depends on how you define success, really.